What happens if you eat mold? It's late at night. You're tired, hungry, and not paying attention. You open the fridge, pull out that leftover sandwich from a few days ago, and take a big bite. But wait, what's that fuzzy texture? You squint at the bread in horror. Green, blue, maybe even black. Mold. Suddenly your mind races. What did you just do? Are you about to drop dead? Will your stomach explode in a cloud of spores like some bad sci-fi movie? We've all been there, maybe not as dramatically, but close enough. But what really happens when you eat mold? Is it harmless, or have you just triggered a microscopic apocalypse in your intestines? To answer that, let's start with what mold actually is. Molds are fungi, some of the oldest, most resilient life forms on Earth. They've been breaking down dead matter for over 1 billion years. Invisible spores float in the air around us, settle on food, and, given enough time and moisture, grow into those colorful patches we dread. Not all mold is dangerous. Some, like penicillium, gave us penicillin, the miracle drug that saved millions of lives. Others, though, are pure poison. Aspergillus, claviceps, and stachybotrys produce mycotoxins, nasty compounds that can damage DNA, trigger immune responses, and shut down vital organs. Historically, mold has killed far more people than we realize. In medieval Europe, ergot-contaminated rye caused hallucinations and death. Some historians even link it to witch trials and mass hysteria. So, what happens when you ingest mold? Your stomach acid, strong enough to dissolve metal, destroys most fungal cells. For healthy people, a small accidental bite might cause nothing more than mild nausea, or nothing at all. But if the mold species is toxic, or if you're immunocompromised, the effects could range from vomiting and diarrhea to liver damage, allergic shock, or fungal infection. But what if we imagine a bigger scenario? What if mold adapted, becoming more toxic, more aggressive, and capable of surviving our defenses? Next up, inside your body, the microscopic battle between your cells and an ancient fungal invader. The moment you swallow that moldy bite, your body springs into action. First stop, the stomach. Bathed in hydrochloric acid, most fungi meet their end in this harsh environment. But some mold spores, encased in tough protective walls, survive the trip. They pass into the intestines, where the real battle begins. Your gut is a dense jungle of life. Trillions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi coexist in a delicate balance called the microbiome. This microscopic community helps you digest food, produce vitamins, and protect against invaders. But mold? Mold is an intruder. And some species don't just sneak through, they attack. Take Aspergillus flavus, for example. It produces aflatoxin, one of the most potent natural carcinogens known. If enough spores survive digestion, they release toxins into your bloodstream. The liver, your body's detox center, takes the hit first. In high doses, aflatoxin can cause acute liver failure, immune suppression, and long-term cancer risks. Your immune system, sensing the threat, launches a counterattack. White blood cells flood the area, producing inflammation, your body's natural fire alarm. If you're healthy, this response usually contains the threat. But in people with compromised immunity, children, the elderly, or those with autoimmune diseases, the mold might gain ground. Spores could enter the lungs, causing allergic reactions, asthma attacks, or even invasive fungal infections like aspergillosis, a potentially fatal condition. Biologically, your cells aren't fighting a simple foodborne illness. They're facing an ancient predator that's evolved to survive extreme conditions. Mold spores are survivors. They've endured ice ages, mass extinctions, and even the vacuum of space, hitching rides on satellites and space station walls. Most people recover from mild mold exposure with little more than a stomachache or an itchy throat. But imagine if this exposure became widespread. What if mold contaminated food supplies on a global scale, slipping past our food safety systems, invading our crops and storage facilities? Suddenly, it's not just your midnight snack at risk, it's entire populations. Now, let's imagine the nightmare expands. It's not just one sandwich in your fridge, it's warehouses, supermarkets, and shipping containers around the world. In this scenario, an aggressive, heat-resistant mold strain evolves, slipping past food safety inspections and thriving even in vacuum-sealed packages. It starts quietly. A few isolated cases of food poisoning appear in local clinics. Doctors are puzzled. Common foodborne bacteria like Salmonella and E. coli don't explain the symptoms. But by the time labs identify mycotoxins in the patient's bloodstreams, the contamination has already spread. Grain silos in the Midwest test positive for Aspergillus toxins. Rice stores in Asia turn out to be breeding grounds for Fusarium molds. Dairy products in Europe, coffee beans in South America, and spices in Africa all carry fungal spores. Suddenly, the global food network, the intricate web that feeds billions, is under siege. Governments scramble to respond. The FDA issues sweeping recalls of bread, cereal, and processed foods. The European Union bans grain exports. Asia halts rice shipments. Panic buying erupts in supermarkets as people hoard canned goods and frozen meals. But frozen and canned foods aren't immune either. Some molds survive freezing and anaerobic environments. Economically, the shock is massive. Commodity prices spike. International trade falters. Countries dependent on grain exports face bankruptcy. Poorer regions, unable to afford expensive, sterilized imports, face famine. Socially, fear spreads faster than the mold itself. Social media fills with rumors, bioterrorism, corporate sabotage, or divine punishment. Conspiracy theories flourish. Some communities turn to local food sources, building small-scale greenhouses and community farms. Others retreat into isolation, sealing off food imports entirely. Medical systems are overwhelmed. Hospitals treat waves of patients suffering from liver failure, allergic reactions, and respiratory infections. Children and the elderly are most vulnerable. Vaccines and antifungal drugs exist, but production can't keep up. In some regions, black market antifungals emerge, with questionable safety. And as the crisis escalates, humanity faces a terrible question. Can our modern world, with its complex supply chains and fragile food security, survive an enemy as ancient and simple as mold? As the mold crisis spreads beyond kitchens and warehouses, it begins to rewrite the very fabric of Earth's ecosystems. Fungal spores, once confined to damp cellars and forgotten bread loaves, now drift across continents on wind currents, contaminate rivers, and infiltrate forests. The biosphere, already fragile from climate change and pollution, faces a new invader that plays by no rules but its own. In agriculture, crops fall victim to blight on an unprecedented scale. Wheat, corn, rice, the staples of civilization, are decimated in the fields. Some plants, unable to fight off fungal infections, rot where they stand. Others produce their own toxic defenses, creating plants that are dangerous to humans and animals alike. Food chains unravel, herbivores starve, predators follow. In the oceans, things are no better. Coastal waters bloom with fungi feeding on agricultural runoff. Fish populations collapse as food webs break down from the bottom up. Species migration patterns shift chaotically, with some regions becoming biological dead zones. Coral reefs, already weakened by bleaching, are overrun by opportunistic fungal colonies, turning vibrant ecosystems into pale, lifeless skeletons. Even the atmosphere changes. Spores released in vast quantities alter air quality, triggering asthma, allergic reactions, and respiratory illnesses on a global scale. Air filtration becomes a public health priority, but in many areas, people have no choice but to breathe in the spores, day after day. In urban areas, mold infiltrates homes, office buildings, and subways. Concrete, drywall, and wood all become breeding grounds. Once thriving cities begin to rot from the inside out. Protective suits and respirators become as common as smartphones. The parallels to past extinction events are eerie. Scientists draw comparisons to the Permian-Triassic extinction, where fungal blooms followed the collapse of forests and the death of plant-eating species. Back then, fungi became the planet's dominant life form for millennia. Could history be repeating itself? Daily life changes completely. People work indoors under UV sterilization lamps. Outdoor recreation becomes a rare luxury, protected by sealed biodomes. Farming moves underground or into space stations orbiting the planet. As the environment collapses, human civilization teeters on the edge. The short-term survival challenges are brutal and relentless. First comes the food crisis. With most surface crops destroyed or unsafe to eat, the global diet shifts overnight. People rely on stockpiled canned goods, hydroponic farms in sealed facilities, and lab-grown proteins. But even these solutions aren't immune. Spores infiltrate water supplies, contaminate hydroponic nutrients, and infest food processing equipment. Technology struggles to keep pace. Air filtration systems, designed for industrial cleanrooms, are hastily adapted for homes, schools, and public spaces. Cities retrofit subway systems and malls with UV sterilizers. But power grids, weakened by years of neglect and fungal corrosion, suffer constant blackouts. Without stable electricity, sterilization fails, and mold wins. Healthcare systems are overwhelmed. Hospitals become quarantine zones for patients with fungal infections. Antifungal medications are in short supply. Makeshift clinics appear in parking garages, while pharmaceutical companies race to develop next-generation treatments. But the fungi evolve too, some strains becoming resistant to existing drugs, creating a deadly biological arms race. Socially, humanity fractures. Some communities isolate, building sealed ecodomes where only the wealthy can afford protection. Others form survivalist enclaves in remote regions, relying on traditional fermentation and ancient herbal antifungals. Meanwhile, urban poor are left behind, breathing in spores daily, suffering the slow erosion of their health and homes. The psychological toll is enormous. Anxiety and depression skyrocket as people lose access to nature, sunlight, and clean air. Children grow up without ever playing outside. Work and school become virtual, with people living their entire lives indoors. Social isolation, compounded by fear of contamination, creates a loneliness epidemic. But amid the darkness, sparks of human ingenuity ignite. Engineers prototype self-sustaining biodomes powered by geothermal energy. Scientists experiment with synthetic biology, engineering mold-resistant crops and animals. Communities share open-source plans for DIY air filtration systems and underground farming modules. The question isn't just how to survive today, it's whether humanity can adapt fast enough to survive tomorrow. Months stretch into years. Humanity realizes the mold crisis is not a passing storm, but a permanent shift in Earth's biosphere. The fight to survive becomes a project to adapt, and that means redesigning the very systems that sustain civilization. First comes engineering. Cities begin to relocate underground, where air filtration and sterilization are easier to control. Old subway tunnels become the arteries of new urban centers. Streets, now too dangerous to walk openly, are replaced by enclosed skybridges and transit tubes connecting sterilized buildings. Above ground, only robotic drones roam the abandoned neighborhoods, performing maintenance and scouting for fungal blooms. Food production undergoes a revolution. Genetically engineered crops are developed to resist mold infection and thrive in low-light environments. Mushrooms, ironically fungi themselves, become a staple protein source, bioengineered to outcompete their toxic wild cousins. Insects, algae, and lab-grown meat fill supermarket shelves. The concept of fresh food becomes obsolete. Safety trumps flavor. Genetic engineering expands beyond plants and animals. Experimental gene therapies aim to make humans more resistant to mycotoxins. Scientists explore enhancing liver enzymes to break down toxins faster, modifying immune cells to target fungal spores, and even altering the microbiome to include beneficial mold-fighting bacteria. These ideas, once controversial, now seem like necessities. The economy shifts radically. Fossil fuels, irrelevant in a world of enclosed systems, give way to fusion, geothermal, and battery power. Agricultural empires collapse, replaced by biotech megacorporations and energy providers. Currency becomes increasingly digital, tied to resource availability. Clean water, air, and calories replace gold and oil as the new metrics of wealth. Politically, the power map redraws itself. Nations that embraced biotech and underground infrastructure, like Switzerland, Singapore, and select U.S. tech hubs, rise as leaders. Traditional powers reliant on agriculture or fossil fuels struggle to adapt. Supranational alliances form around survival, not ideology. Defense pacts against fungal threats, trade networks for antifungals and safe food, and global research coalitions. Culturally, humanity grapples with its new identity. Are we still Earth's dominant life form, or merely survivors in a world now ruled by fungi? Art, literature, and religion evolve to reflect this existential shift. Some worship the mold as nature's judgment. Others see it as a cosmic challenge, spurring humanity's next evolutionary leap. Just when humanity seems to be adjusting to its fungal-infested reality, a new crisis looms. Deep within the melting permafrost of Siberia, scientists uncover something terrifying. Ancient fungal spores, trapped in ice for millions of years, have awakened. Unlike modern mold, these prehistoric strains are faster, deadlier, and completely resistant to current antifungal drugs. At first, isolated outbreaks occur near Arctic research stations. Entire teams fall ill within days: fevers, hallucinations, and organ failure. Samples sent to biohazard labs reveal that these ancient fungi produce an entirely new class of toxins, never before encountered by human immune systems. Panic spreads faster than the spores themselves. Humanity faces a stark choice. Should we pour dwindling resources into fighting this new fungal enemy, risking collapse elsewhere? Or should we abandon infected regions entirely, sealing them off and focusing on protecting the remaining safe zones underground and in space? But in the midst of fear, hope flickers. A group of synthetic biologists in a lunar laboratory, safely away from Earth's contamination, announces a breakthrough. Using CRISPR and directed evolution, they've engineered a strain of bacteriophage-like viruses that specifically target toxic fungi, breaking down their cell walls without harming other life forms. It's the first potential cure in years. Deploying the cure, however, is risky. The viruses must be released into Earth's biosphere, where they could mutate unpredictably. If they fail, the situation could worsen. If they work, humanity might reclaim the surface. The debate is fierce. Some argue for containment and isolation, protecting the last clean habitats at all costs. Others advocate bold action, believing it's humanity's only shot at a livable Earth. In the end, desperation wins. The cure is released through drones and weather systems. For weeks, no one knows if it's working. Then, slowly, signs of change appear. Surface mold begins to recede, air quality improves. Crops, once blighted, sprout green again. But the battle is far from over. The ancient spores are persistent, and humanity remains vulnerable. Still, for the first time in decades, people step outside without respirators and see sunlight filter through the clouds. With the fungal crisis finally retreating, humanity faces a daunting new task: rebuilding a planet it barely recognizes. Forests are gone, oceans remain scarred, and much of the surface infrastructure has rotted away beneath decades of unchecked mold growth. But amid the ruins, hope stirs. First, the environment. Scientists lead global restoration projects to revive ecosystems. Fast-growing, genetically modified trees are planted to stabilize soil and absorb residual toxins. Lab-cultured coral polyps, engineered to resist fungal infiltration, are seeded across the world's damaged reefs. In the skies, atmospheric scrubbers work tirelessly to remove spore-laden particulates, gradually clearing the air. Wildlife returns cautiously. Some species, thought extinct, reappear in isolated pockets, adapting to the new conditions. Others are resurrected through cloning and gene editing. Wolves roam reborn forests, bees pollinate engineered crops, and fish schools dart through carefully managed aquatic preserves. Society begins to reshape itself. Above ground, new cities rise, not open-air metropolises, but sealed habitats designed with modular construction and self-sustaining ecosystems. Transparent domes filter light and air, blending nature and technology in ways once imagined only in science fiction. Education focuses on resilience and planetary stewardship. Every child learns ecology, genetic engineering, and disaster preparedness alongside reading and math. Humanity, once obsessed with endless growth, now prioritizes sustainability and caution. But the scars of the fungal apocalypse run deep. Many regions remain abandoned, marked as permanent quarantine zones where ancient spores may still linger. Historic landmarks are lost forever beneath layers of decay. Economically, the recovery is slow. Supply chains rebuild cautiously, favoring local production over risky global dependence. Long-term scientific efforts shift toward prevention. Global fungal monitoring networks scan the atmosphere, soil, and oceans for new mutations. Space-based observatories keep watch for asteroids, solar flares, and other cosmic threats. Humanity no longer assumes it is safe. It verifies and prepares. Social structures evolve. Power no longer rests solely with militaries or politicians, but with scientists, environmental engineers, and those who keep the air breathable and the food safe. Yet in every conversation, a question lingers. If mold nearly ended us, what else waits in the shadows of our fragile world? Years pass. Humanity, scarred but enduring, looks back on the mold age not just as a catastrophe, but as a defining chapter in its history. In universities and archives, people debate what the crisis taught us. Were we victims of nature's randomness or of our own arrogance, having built fragile systems with no backup plan? One legacy is a newfound humility toward Earth itself. Environmental stewardship is no longer a fringe cause. It's the foundation of civilization. Forest regrowth programs, wildlife corridors, and protected biospheres are treated with the same urgency as national defense. Humanity recognizes that we do not dominate nature. We coexist with it, precariously. Another legacy is cosmic awareness. If fungi, ancient and earthbound, nearly wiped us out, what threats wait beyond our atmosphere? Humanity's space programs shift into overdrive. Colonization of Mars, the Moon, and orbital habitats accelerates, not out of ambition, but out of necessity. We cannot afford to be a single-planet species. Space becomes not just a frontier of exploration, but of preservation. Lunar seed vaults store Earth's genetic diversity. Asteroid-based data archives preserve humanity's knowledge against planetary collapse. New telescopes scan for interstellar threats, and missions to distant exoplanets search for worlds untouched by fungal spores. But it's not all outward expansion. Many choose to remain earthbound, dedicating their lives to restoring what was lost. These Earth Guardians, as they're called, rebuild cities in harmony with ecosystems, creating living architecture where plants, animals, and people thrive together. They advocate for slower, more sustainable progress, reminding humanity of the fragility that brought them to this point. Culturally, the crisis leaves its mark. Art reflects themes of decay and rebirth. Music carries tones of solitude and hope. Religions reinterpret ancient texts, seeing mold not as punishment, but as a test, a reminder that life's balance can tip at any moment. And through it all, one question haunts every generation. Will we remain vigilant, preparing for the next unknown, or will we slip back into complacency, inviting disaster once again? Centuries later, historians debate whether the mold apocalypse was humanity's downfall or its greatest awakening. The surface of Earth is lush again, but changed. Forests grow in geometrical patterns shaped by gene-edited seeds. Rivers flow through channels designed to resist contamination. Humanity has rebuilt, but not as conquerors of nature, more like tenants, paying rent in responsibility and humility. Some futures paint an optimistic picture. Humanity, having conquered its fungal foe, spreads carefully into the cosmos. Self-sustaining colonies orbit Venus, terraform patches of Mars, and send robotic emissaries beyond the Kuiper Belt. These new settlements carry with them the lessons of Earth's near collapse: diversify habitats, monitor ecosystems, and never underestimate life's smallest players. On distant moons and exoplanets, mold-resistant crops feed new civilizations, while bioengineered bacteria protect against local microbial threats. Other visions are darker. Some argue we've traded one cage for another. On Earth and beyond, humans live in sealed habitats, dependent on machines to scrub the air and water. Nature becomes something to be feared, not embraced. Humanity survives, but at the cost of freedom, spontaneity, and perhaps wonder. And in the middle, there is a balanced view. Humanity accepts its fragility, but refuses to be paralyzed by fear. Exploration continues, but always with caution. Planetary defense systems scan for cosmic dangers. Environmental monitoring never sleeps. Cultures celebrate not just survival, but resilience, the stubborn, hopeful refusal to give up. Philosophically, the mold crisis redefines humanity's place in the universe. We are not the masters of life. We are participants in a vast, complex web where even the tiniest organism can shape our destiny. Life on Earth and beyond is a dialogue, not a monologue. And so, as the first human-built starship leaves the solar system, carrying thousands of life forms in its databanks, we ask, will the universe greet us as conquerors, caretakers, or just another species trying to survive? Because in the end, the mold taught us a simple truth. Life doesn't need us. But we desperately need life. So what do you think? If humanity nearly fell to mold, what else might we be missing in our cosmic backyard? Would we learn from the crisis or repeat our mistakes on distant worlds? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this microscopic journey through survival and adaptation, hit subscribe for more science-based what-if explorations of our strange universe.